this level, dancing and with stars and all that, and then Vogue and GQ magazines, and then rock bottom.
Lost a lot, everything. I hadn't even put it together that it was substances or alcohol, definitely mentally very unwell.
When you're rock bottom, it's very hard for most people to just, get up and keep going.
I went a long way down the rabbit hole of addiction, almost died.
You have experiences from dancing to modeling to remodeling.
I'm really grateful.
Welcome to Knowledge Seeker. I'm your host, Farhan Mirza. So picture this, Australian ballet stage, Vogue cover, GQ magazine, dining with royals, and then light shuts off. Darkness, addiction, rock bottom. So tonight, from global dancer to a sober warrior, unbreakable Rod Francis join us to share how the underworld will forge the strongest light. Rod, welcome to Knowledge Seeker.
Thanks very much, Farhan. Great to be here.
How you doing?
Well, generally pretty good. Yeah,
Good.
Life is busy, life is rich, and I'm really delighted to be here, having met you, and we had such a rich conversation. I'm looking forward to this.
Yes, likewise.
Yeah.
I mean, you have quite a resume, so I don't know where to start with because you've been all over the world, and you started from ballet, and then art, and then of course modeling, the GQ magazines to Vogue covers, and then now as a coaching. So take us back and also you originally from Australia.
I am, yeah.
So take us back where all this started and end up in Chattanooga, Tennessee.
Yeah, it's
Quite a journey.
It has been quite a journey, and interestingly, I was just doing a post about this on last week because I had another first last week that I've just been writing for academic journals, and I had my first paper published in a philosophy journal last week. And
Nice.
And I was just writing a post to people. I called it the not so subtle art of falling upwards, and when I was doing that, what I reflected on was when I was a kid back in Australia. I grew up in Brisbane, mostly in Australia, and I when I was sent to school in my first year of high school, I had a really serious accident. I severed all the nerves and arteries and tendons in one foot, basically, most of them. And so I had to have very intensive surgery. It took me quite a while to begin to walk again. And what happened with that, why that's an important moment to talk about, is it really changed a lot of the direction of my life. That when I got back to school, you're at a very formative part of your learning. I'd missed so much, like things like mathematics and science. You just didn't get the ground rules. Mm-hmm. So I basically fell through the cracks, and I ended up just giving up. I left school, never even got a high school, never even went through high school.
Really?
All the way, no. And I was really a little lost. My parents were obviously concerned, but something through a series of meetings, I realized something I really loved was performing arts. And so I got it in my mind that I was going to go and be an actor or something like that. And I packed my bag, saved some money, took off from Brisbane, went down to Sydney, and I was going to try out for the National Institute of Arts or something like that. And on the way, I thought it'd be really good. I'm going to get these other skills. Maybe I'll go and do some dance training. And I'd met a dancer, and I thought, this is amazing. You can do that. That's a job. Really, people do that. So I got interested, and I'll never forget. I went to this first dance class, and it was like probably heaven to some people. It was like 40 women. All ages. Like from young kids to all women, and me. In this dance class, that was it, and they were doing this sort of jazz dance kind of thing. And man, I was like 6 left feet and, but something about it, I loved it. I thought I don't know what it is. I kept going back, and suddenly people were saying to me, why don't you come to this class and why don't you do that? And there were very few men in the dance scene, like there are a lot more these days. And I happened to meet this very, very good male dancer who had retired young, very, very good teacher. And he took me under his wing and really supported me. And it just so happened that the acting thing, I kind of did some of that, but dance really took over. And within a few years, they put me forward to audition for the the School of the National Ballet Company, and I got accepted. And it just was something like we were talking before about sometimes these things choose you.
Yeah.
That's what it felt. But, it was that thing. I don't know if people have this in their life that you suddenly start doing something, you think, this is the fit for me right now. This is just the thing I need to be doing.
Yeah. No, I mean, usually ballet dancing is, relates to, like you said, for mostly ladies and women. And then
At that time.
that time, yeah. And then, of course, so what basically interests you in a ballet dancing? There's certain things that,
Yeah, I'd like to say, I guess there's a lot of things. One of the things, that's hard to kind of articulate in some ways because, first of all, it was performing. It was something to do with the body. It just felt very natural. Like I was very, very physically gifted to work in that area. So you because to have a career in dance is everyone can train, but particularly in classical ballet and you really need certain types of physique. You need certain kind of attributes in your physique. Like turnout and so forth, and certain degrees of flexibility. And I just happened to have those attributes. So that really helped me a lot on the way. There was, and there's the part that I find it really hard to articulate, about what it was about that. But there was something about how I was able to be in my body. And I have to remind you, I almost cut my foot off at one point.
Yeah, that's
right?
what I was saying.
I'd even had to learn to walk again in my early teens. And here I was in this national school. And there were impediments from that, like it did get in the way in some way, but there was something about, I'll tell you what it is. The best way I can describe it is, have you ever had those dreams where you can fly? Or am I just crazy, right? Those sort of dreams where you can fly? That's what it was like.
Ah, interesting.
That's what it was like.
Wow. Yeah. Well
it was
said.
like you were in the dream that you could fly.
You fly. So how long did you do the ballet dancing?
Professionally, 12 years.
Okay.
And I didn't just do classical. I was very classically trained, but I did a lot of modern dance. I got very interested and I did kind of everything in there. I choreographed, I taught. I left Australia, still not that long after I came out, worked with a couple of companies and worked with a few people in Australia. And then I had a girlfriend at the time. We both decided it's a big thing for Australians. You're quite isolated there. We wanted to go out in the big world of dance. So we moved overseas to Japan, worked there for a while. And then we moved over to Europe. And that's where I did a lot of my career, was traveling and based out of London, working over in the continent, came over here and toured with a company. So it was about 12 years, professionally doing that.
So from ballet dancing to modeling, how this switch thing?
Well, that was actually, it was another injury in the leg that partly caused that. That I had, I was
dangerous to yourself.
Well, that was like I used to train a lot. I also, obviously I trained a lot as a dancer, but I trained in other ways. I love going to the gym and I used to swim a lot and I was very, very, probably a little overtraining in some ways. But one of the guys where I used to train said, you'd be amazing at this. We do this martial arts, this sort of kickboxing. You'd be amazing at it, and I did a little bit of boxing training just for the technique and fun of it. And he said, why don't you come along? And I thought, okay, well, I'll go down. I went for a couple of sessions. And then one session, I just happened to be sparring with this guy who I would probably say, I think he was just a little bit wild, shall I say, is the kindest I could say. And he broke my toe. Ooh. And well, for most of us, that's not really catastrophic. For a dancer, it's catastrophic.
Yeah.
Right. It's you're out for like 6 to 10 weeks. You're not really doing a lot. But just prior to or as that was going on, I was single. I was dating a few people, and one of the people I was dating was what they call a booker in a model agency, and that's the person who works on the. They used to work on the booking table, so when clients are coming in and so forth, and they were a manager, and she had said to me, like why don't you come along and we, get some photographs, and maybe you can come and we can get you in the agency, and you can make a bit of extra cash. And that was a pretty good thing for a dancer, because it's the one thing I can tell you about dancers is you don't do it for the money.
Yeah.
You do not do it for the money. You're a pair of shoes and you travel the world, but you don't, it's not well paid.
Money.
You do it for the love.
Exactly.
It's a
art is all about love.
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
Most artists make any great money.
Correct.
And they do it, like you said, is because of the art. I
Yeah.
actually had a guest a couple of weeks ago, and she was artist, and I know she basically eats, sleep, breathe art. And
It's your life.
when I asked her, how much, she said, there is no money in the art. We are doing it because of the love, like you said. So yeah.
Absolutely. I would go places and work for nothing regularly because I loved the work this person was doing. I wanted to be part of this thing. It was that powerful. So when this person was saying this, I was actually, a little older in the modeling game. I was in my early 30s, and it sounded pretty good to me. I thought, a bit of extra cash, no, fantastic. And so we did that. She organised some photographs. The agency took me on, and very quickly, this was coming up for Christmas, I remember, and this photographer came into town, and she was talking about him. I didn't know anything about the game, but apparently he was very famous, and said, he's booking all these things. They sent me off to what they call a casting, and this guy booked me. And this was all at the time I had the kind of foot thing going on. So I was a little bit, footloose and fancy free, I had a little bit of spare time. So I thought this was great. Well, he booked me, and I shot a whole bunch of Vogue and GQ straight away. He left, and then and it just kind of happens for some people like this. Then someone came into town and they wanted to fly me to New Zealand to come back on the QE2, this big liner, and do a sort of a shoot for that. And then I did that. This was all one after the other, and I was thinking, okay, this is all right. I can deal with this. And then I got off I literally got off the boat. We came in at dawn in Sydney, got off the boat, grabbed my bag, and I thought, I'll just pop through the agency before I go home. Popped in, and they walked in and said, we got Tokyo on the phone. Can you be there on Wednesday?
Oh, wow.
And I did that, and I was there for 3 months, came back in the agency, same thing. We've got someone from Paris. They meet, okay, they want you there for the next season.
And you were working with the Vogue magazine or GQ?
Well, no, I didn't work with I worked with agencies, and they set me up with agencies.
Okay.
And what would happen is they would send you round and, in a sense, sell you to the magazines. So the photographer was usually contracted by the magazine, and they would cast around and look for, sometimes the magazine would do it. Often the photographer would say, I want to do this kind of shoot. I think this is good. This is a good person. And so when I after that, I arrived in Italy, and didn't do much the first week, and my agent kept saying, don't worry, Bella, you'll be okay. And then they sent me they have a men's Vogue over there called L'Uomo Vogue, and they sent me in there, and I shot something, they loved me. I shot something like 60 pages with them straight away, like one after the other. And so just saying all of that, it's like I wasn't working at this hard, this was just happening, and my head was spinning a little bit, and I couldn't dance that much because I had this injury. And I just kind of thought, okay, I'm going to roll. I really loved my profession. I really wanted to be a dancer. I really loved where I was going with that. But this is going to happen once. This is not happening again. This is like, give it a go. I'll run it for a few years, maybe a year or two, and then I'll be back at what I want to do.
And how long did you do the modeling then?
About 5 years.
5 years, wow. Did you go back to ballet or after that? No.
I used to go and do classes. Okay. I was doing classes up until about, before I moved to Chattanooga, actually. I was still going back to classes because I was in London at that time. And, you work at it in a different way. Like in my 30s, I was still in my peak. I was still doing all the tricks and the jumps and the turns and all that kind of stuff, but I just started to move in a different way as I got older.
So doing ballet and then modeling, I'm pretty sure that you have some backstage story that basically resonate with you still. Would you like to share any?
Backstage stories? Yeah, well, I guess the things that there are more little snippets that I can run. One is I remember doing this job for a very famous outdoor wear company, and part of the job was they helicoptered us up to the top of this mountain in Switzerland, and there was nothing either side; it was just sheer. But this snow on top of the mountain, and they shot with us up in this, high in the Alps in this place, and there were just moments like that. You'd think, like this can't be real, or sitting on a castle there's a place called Lindisfarne in up in the northeast of England. It's this, they call it Holy Isle. It's this beautiful place, and we went up there to shoot a commercial for one of the big drinks companies in Europe. And, I'm sitting out there playing I used to play the sort of count or the kind of aristocratic guy because I was this older guy, with a very British sort of look, I had hair then that was all very curly, and sort of, sitting there with this beautiful young woman, kind of just, us just chatting on this gorgeous castle while someone's taking, there were just things like that you thought, this is incredible. And there were darker sides as well. There are aspects that I wasn't really exposed to much because I was an older model. But there's stuff that's coming in the news at the moment about some of the darker sides of the industry, and people may have seen it over the years. There are some of the names, these sort of famous names from France in particular. One of them was my agent. I didn't know them personally, but they owned the agency I was with. And, you would see, I never saw anything that I could say, here's a story. But, you'd see stuff and you'd think, that doesn't look right.
That's what I was going to go actually ask you about, the darker side of this industry.
It was definitely dark in there. There were, at the time, like, sometimes I'd see these things like these young girls, like 15-year-old girls unchaperoned, wandering around Europe, and you're thinking, man, that's like, if I have a daughter, that's not happening.
I mean, this modeling thing and dancing thing, all glamorous and all that on basically on the TV or on the, but I'm pretty sure you've been there. You actually know what's exactly the darker side of this kind of a thing.
There are some very predatory people.
In
those industries, without a doubt.
And so you did that for 5 years. So you were in UK at that time?
I was in the UK, and I'd moved to the UK. I was then based out of there because I'd been based I was like in Paris and Milan, and came over here based in New York for a little while. Had one of the famous H-1B visas, on about at the moment, and so I was back there, and I'd decided to go back to university. Because I thought, actually, I've got some time. I'll do some study. So I went back and started doing some courses in university, and work was sort of slowing down because it's also the fashion industry. And the thing about the fashion industry is you're in and you're out. That's fashion, And particularly for men, some of the women have. First of all, they earn a whole lot more than you do as a male, which is, I think it's damn right. It's very few professions that women get to do that.
Yes.
Good on them. And they generally have more longevity than not all the men, but a lot of the men. So that was all going on. I was also back in England. There was a lot, like I'd been mixing with a very fun crowd of people, shall I say, as well. And so
a fun crowd, meaning good way?
A lot of partying, not necessarily in the most helpful way, but, it's the sort of high life, and everyone's making a lot of money. And I was also mixing with a lot of music people, and I started fooling around with there was a lot, it was the early days of acid house music, and it was a very exciting time to be in London, and raves were starting and clubs were amazing. There were these incredible music movements that were happening, and I got caught up in the whole thing. It was incredible. I actually DJ'd for a little bit. I've gone over and I've got some stories about that, but I was running some clubs, and I was making house music, and I was just trying things out, because I could see that this other thing I was doing wasn't going to last forever. I couldn't go back to dancing.
Yeah.
You know, that was gone by then.
So you were basically all over the place.
I was all over the place.
So let's talk about, I mean, you know, we talk about the fashion industry dark side. Let's talk about Rod dark side too, because I know you, with all these parties and all this thing, you got into some kind of I mean, you have a dark side, which is, of course, you can, if you like to share with us.
Yeah, sure.
And
Yeah.
that'd be great. I know you got into addiction.
So there's this. I did. I went a long way down the rabbit hole of addiction. Almost died. Very literally, nearly died. And you know there's this saying in recovery circles that if you hang around a barber shop, you'll end up getting a haircut. And so if you hang around a lot of those places that are all full of fun and games, and for many people, they can have a lot of fun there and not really be touched by the darker aspects of it, you know, that it just was not me. And I don't have an explanation about why me or why some people. That I was never that interested in. But what I did realize is that there was a point where I realized I was in a lot of trouble, you know, and you start to realize that you, first of all, the behaviors are compulsive and you don't have control over them. You know, you like to fool yourself that you've got choices, and you suddenly realize you haven't got a choice in this. You know, the night you thought you were going to go out and just hang out and have a couple of beers with a few mates, suddenly it's 3 days later. You know,
Wow.
And you're coming out of blackout, you know, that kind of stuff.
So when you talk about addiction, that was like alcohol, drugs, or what are you talking about?
Well, a bit of mix of everything, really. You know, yeah. I mean, there was I certainly, like, the fellowship, the recovery group I went into was Alcoholics Anonymous.
Okay.
But you know what I realized with that, Farhan? We like to talk about it as though it's one thing and sometimes it is just the one thing that's the problem. But something I observed after many years working in recovery circles and listening and looking at a lot of people who had recovered. You know, if you go to 12-step groups or something like that, you hear a lot of stories. You get to know a lot of stories. Is that many people, it's a bit like whack-a-mole. You put one thing down and another comes up. You put one thing down and another comes up. You put one thing down and another comes up. So to really recover, to me, means you've got to look at every part of your life, at every part of your heart, of every part of your mind. And that was, you know, where I went with it, that you could have given me Coca-Cola, you know, in that addictive mindset. You know, I mean, Coca-Cola wouldn't quite have the consciousness transforming qualities that I was probably seeking at the point.
So how old are you at that time when you have this?
Yeah, I was coming up into, I guess it was my late 30s.
30s.
Yeah.
So you went from like this level, dancing and with stars and all that, and then Vogue and GQ magazines, and then rock bottom.
Lost a lot, everything.
So what basically at that moment, you know, keep you going? Because when you are rock bottom, it's very hard for most people to just, you know, get up and keep going. But it seems like that, all that, and then rock bottom, and then you get up and then you start all over again. What was the one thing, or, well, not being the one thing, but, you know, what was the thing that basically keep you going?
So someone that I knew suggested to me to try these 12-step groups, and at that time I hadn't even put it together that it was substances or alcohol or, you know, anything. But I was definitely mentally very unwell.
Yeah.
You know, very mentally unwell. And I didn't really say anything to anybody because, you know, your world becomes
Isolated,
a lot smaller and you isolate. So someone I happened to be talking to, and I mentioned it to them, and they just looked at me and said, "Oh, you know, my friend Sue went to this group called Alcoholics Anonymous, and it really helped her." And initially they said that, I went, what the hell are you talking about, Alcoholics? You know, and then I thought, I've got nowhere else to go. I might as well go. And I went to a meeting, and I didn't understand a word they said, but someone there said, you're right, came up and spoke to me, and they said, what, it's your first time. I said, look, this is probably not for you. I'll go and take you to another meeting. It'll be great. You'll love it. And I did. I loved it. People came up and spoke to me, and I went out and had coffee with them, and we were completely different. I remember this guy I was sitting with was 15 years younger than me. He was a gay guy, like we didn't have a lot of shared experience, but there was something about what was happening to us that I identified with. And I kept hearing those stories, and I kept coming back, and it's not for everybody. 12-step groups, and I get it. Some people don't want to go there for all their own reasons. But for me, penniless, trying to find my way back into sanity and understand what was happening. And it was a lifeline.
Yeah.
And I got in the middle of the bed. Oh, I don't know if that's a great, but in the middle of the boat, I just went all in. I just shut my mouth and got on with it, and started the work. And that work really went on. And I did, you get in, you help, because a lot of it's about group help. You become treasurers, you become presidents of things. I ended up sitting on I became the national president of one of the fellowship groups in the UK, because just doing service. I used to be the person, they call them phone office responders. So if you were, in real trouble, you'd phone up the AA phone office or one of the group's phone offices, and they would call me, and I'd go out to your house and pick you up and talk to your family and take you to a meeting. And, it helps you. You get your self-esteem back.
Accountability, I think.
You say, accountability, but you start, people used to say, if you want self-esteem, do esteemable things.
Oh, yeah. That's a good one. It seems like that the way you're telling us, I think you, first of all, find your why. And secondly, I think you got a mentor. Because I think the mentor in anybody's life is a great asset.
Yeah.
And I think the gentleman you're talking about, basically, I think he basically took you under his wings. So that was in UK. What basically brought you to come to the United States?
Okay, so the steps between there and then were, first of all, I needed to get some work. I didn't know what the heck to do. I'd done some university level study, but I thought, what am I going to do? Teach English or history or something? It's like, no, I went out. I was working. I had to go out and get any work. I would paint houses. I would do whatever
Our jobs.
It was different. Different after being a dancer and flying around the world and on helicopters on the top of mountains. So and then I thought I better get some skills. So I went to night school. I became a plumber, I became a gas engineer, and I became an electrician.
Oh wow!
And then I happened to meet someone who was an interior designer, and I set up a little company. And then we decided, I saw an avenue where there was something about doing a lot of money in London. And I thought, okay, I really started to build some skills and I knew some people. So we set up a company contracting for medium to high-end bathrooms in London. And we started that company and we suddenly got lifted up by design magazines. We were on the radio, and this little, thing, us from home, just took off. We had offices. We had, after 7 years, I had people who they had a big retail business. They wanted to partner with us. The banks. It was one of those businesses that was low margin, but pretty good turnover.
Pretty good turnover, yes.
But so the banks, the bank came to us and said, look, what you need is a finance lift, and then you need to expand the business because you need more you need more turnover of business in order to kind of be drawing enough profit out of it. So it was that expansion point that often happens in any growing business. And I just suddenly, I was driving across London and I realised I stopped at these lights and I had projects on all over the place. There was some disaster going on in about 3 locations. I was going over to put the fires out. There was all this stuff going on, so much in my head. And I stopped at the lights and I looked at myself and I thought, this is never going to change. This is, even if we get the finance, even if we get all that sort of stuff, I realised I didn't want to do this. I didn't want to build bathrooms and I didn't care how successful the business was, And so I went out and spoke to a mentor. And what I realised I wanted to do was something more working with people. You know, I'd really loved when I was in the fellowships, helping people. And I thought, maybe I'll get some training in that. I'll become a psychotherapist or something like that. And this person was a doctor, and they said, yeah, psychotherapy, it's really good. You'd be good at that. I said, you ever thought about coaching? And I went, well, I don't know enough about it, you know, but then when he explained it to me and I went and did some research, I thought, yeah, that's really my thing. And so then I went in and said to the people I'm selling the business, I'm getting out. And, you know, if you want to buy, you can buy but I'll be done by the end of the year. And I was.
Okay. So that was what year?
That was probably 2000 and that year would have been about 2006 or 7 or something like that. So it's almost 20 years ago.
20 years ago.
And so then I went off and did training, and I got invited in to start working on coach training programs, and I realized I had another skill. I was really, really good at teaching, and I was really, really good at designing curriculum.
So now then, of course, you become coach, and now you are training entrepreneurs and other coaches how to be, you know, scale their businesses and entrepreneurship.
That's one aspect that I do. Yeah.
So, I mean, this is like you have experiences from dancing to modeling to remodeling the bathrooms and now coaching. So in all these aspects of life or experiences, what would you that you learn that you can say, okay, I would not learn in any other way because of all this thing?
Yeah, what would I learn if I hadn't, apart from all of those things? Well, one thing I would say to people, you know, I'm really grateful. I'm grateful I'm alive for a start, but I'm really grateful that, you know, I've had this incredible range of opportunities in my life to explore things. But there are some common threads that come through for me to now, like in the profession that I'm in. What I mostly like to work with is for people. I would say as I try to help people not suffer. You know, like to live better lives and not suffer. So, you know, whether it's a leader, whether it's an entrepreneur whether I also work with couples, you know, I've done training with the Gottman Institute so I have a lot of different people, or just kind of like general life, you know, I like to work in that. But the fundamental is that, you know, how can we live richer lives and not suffer?
You actually have the Oscar Wilde famous quote actually on your website. I mean, I'll quote it. It says, to live is to live is the best thing in the world. Most people exist, and that's all.
That's it.
And I think that's very true, because most people live until age 80, but they die at age 26 because they stop growing.
Yeah.
And you know, in your experience, you've been from all those stars and all that, and you still actually now back to level up now, and you're coaching other people. What is that someone right now listening to our conversation and they've been through a very low, like rock bottom, how they can, with your experience or with your expertise, they can basically get up and then keep going like you did?
First thing I would say is you don't have to do it on your own.
Yeah.
In fact, I think it's a really bad idea to try and do it on your own. You know,
seek help.
Well, wise help. I think you have to be judicious about where you're going to seek help. But you know, like one thing they would say again in the fellowships, which I thought was really good advice, was, you know, if you want something or you want to achieve something, one way is to find someone who's already got it and ask them how they did it.
Yeah.
That's one way, you know. The way I work with clients is I don't have to know everything about what they want to become, but I really have a lot of tools and questions that help people find their own answers. But you don't need to do it on your own. I think it's a terrible idea to try and do these things on your own.
So talking about tools, what would you give at least one or two tools right now to someone that they can basically use that tool and make their, I guess, life better?
Yeah, so one of the things that I find that has been very helpful for me is to take time to try and understand my own mind and my motivations. That we so often operate automatically in the world. We just make assumptions that that this is how things are, or this is how I am, or that my ideas are correct. I think that's one of the things that I've really learnt to do, is to challenge my own thinking and to try and understand my mind, including my biases and my assumptions and all of these things, because if I'm running on automatic, I'm only ever going to get the same results.
Yeah, well,
if I want to do something new, I've got to get out of that loop.
Doing the same thing over and over, expecting different
classic,
result
isn't it? That's right. So that would be the first thing. And there are lots of ways we can do that. You can work with a coach or a therapist or something like that. They help us break these unhelpful feedback loops in our life, but also more just to become wiser by understanding, how my mind actually operates and what I've got to watch out for in there and what I can lean into, because, it's a pretty valuable thing as well. I've been a mindfulness and a Buddhist practitioner for most of my life probably, but more intently in the last 20 years. And a lot of the practices that we do are about how, practices that help us understand the mind.
So meditation.
I do a lot of meditation practice, a lot of practices around the development of kindness and compassion as well. And they're something that I'm really very very much leaning into as I get older. It's something I think we could all do in these days, is just learn to be a little kinder to ourselves and to others,
Being a human and being, like you said, kinder.
Yeah.
So there's some kind of rituals that you basically do that basically keep you grounded? And also, when you are in your down, how did you motivate yourself? Because motivation, I think I don't know, what do you think? Motivation is kind of overrated, underrated? Because everybody wants motivation. But I usually say when you take actions, that follows the motivation. I mean, in your experience, you're the expert in teaching other people. What kind of rituals, you do, or you would recommend someone who basically struggling?
There are so many, but I mean, one is that I'm a daily meditation practitioner, so it grounds me.
Yeah.
It just allows me to be with the mind and understand, some days my mind's like a waterfall, some days it's, a bit more like a pond, less so commonly so, but, just to understand, this is just how I am, but also those practices help me develop my mind in different ways. I guess that's one ritual that I always like to do. Exercise.
Moving your body.
You can't underestimate the cognitive benefits of exercise, not only just the regular physical benefits, the cardiovascular benefits and so forth. But, that is a really powerful tool for me, is, particularly when I'm really feeling bound up in the business of my life, is just to exercise, get out and exercise. I would also say, if you can, find some way to be in nature.
Yeah, I think nature, exercise, moving your body, I think these are all. And also finding a good mentor, because nowadays,
find a good mentor.
Yeah, nowadays, as you know, everybody's like an influencer and everybody's a mentor. Everybody wants to be a leader. But there's a very famous quote from George Bernard Shaw. He said, leaders don't need a title. Having a title does not make you one. So doesn't mean you don't have to find a title as leader. He's a leader. You need to find a true leader. So being a coach and being actually training other people, there's any certain projects right now you're working on it in your field?
Yeah, yes, I'm something that's come out as this latter stage part of my life is I started realizing that that a lot of what I've been working with has been I work. My model of coaching is built around this field called cognitive science. It's the science of how humans make decisions, think, and the most current views of how that happens is that it's a process that involves the body significantly. Involves the body where we are, because we know where we are in each situation
All of that,
impacts the way we're thinking.
On that here,
So I've been developing a model of coaching.
so
This
that
is a
all of
theory
these
of
processes
cognition
are
called
deeply
embodied
embedded within
cognition or
multiple
4E
contexts.
cognition. The paper I just had published in a philosophy journal is all about that, and it's a fairly new modality. It's not crazy. It's not left field. It's highly effective. But I realised I was developing something new here. So I've now launched into this new part of my life where I'm publishing in international scholarly journals, which was for a boy who never made it through high school.
Yeah.
I feel quite proud of that.
No, you should be, because that's quite a journey. That's quite a journey.
And I tell you, that's no easy, like when I got the first feedback, when I submitted to the journal, they said, look, your argument's really good. We love your research. You got to learn how to put this in the way that we like it. You're
saying that it's not easy? You mean, you've been through all that?
So that's right. So that's one area. I'm really developing that body of work. I have a coach training program that works internationally, and we develop that. We're developing that model of how to work with humans and how to help people think differently and think bigger and think better and not suffer. So that's one. And I'm just working on a book. I've been working on a book for about 5 years, but I've just had publishing these papers has really freshened something. So they're the projects I'm mostly engaged with at the moment in my professional world.
So you're working on a book, you said? Mm-hmm. It's published yet or not yet?
No. I wrote most of it, and I wrote most of a book, and then I thought, I don't know that I'd read it. Like it's good stuff, but it's just I want it to be more enjoyable. I want to sing a song to your heart through this book. I want the words to live in a way. And so that's what I'm now doing.
So you're working on it. Have you have a title yet? Or
Yeah. It's called Coaching at the Edge, Myth, Embodiment, and the New Science of Transformation.
Okay. Have you any date to publish yet?
No. I've just started redoing the whole formatting of the book again. So I have a lot of material, but I've got to completely remake
Because
it.
when you publish that, you need to come back and talk about your book.
Great. I'd love to.
Yeah.
I'd be delighted. Yeah.
So all these experiences you have, from dancing to modeling to remodeling the bathrooms and now coaching. So if you go back to your 18-year-old and you have to advise one thing yourself, what would you be, that advice for you?
Yeah, don't pick up the booze. I'm Australian, we love a beer.
Yes.
But when I see and look, that would never work. How would that? I can't imagine my 18-year-old. I think my 18-year-old would laugh at me, like probably most 18-year-olds would laugh at me if I said that. But I could say all the things that people say, believe in yourself, and all of that, and they're all really good and they're all really valid advice.
But if you just give one advice,
I don't know, it'd be advice, but I guess I'd look him in the eye like this and I'd say, it's going to be okay.
Yeah,
it's going to be okay.
And I think you've been all that, but then you need to find some kind of a why you want to do something. And I think in your case, you found a mentor, then you found a why.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because that basically guides you to, do this good things and being with people and all. And that's how you realize, well, I want to be with people. I'm good with people. Yeah. And you are. And now you're training people. So I think, like you said, I think everything will be okay. I think that's a great advice. So talk about, you're married?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. So talk about when you moved to US, and I think you lived in New York too.
Well, I had lived in New York when I was modeling, but I was living in London. I was divorced. That my designer wife and that things didn't work out. You know, the company, whatever it was, it just didn't work out, and so we realised we needed to separate. And I was single for a long time. I really enjoyed being single. And I was, building my coaching business and really developing. I was working for coach training programs, and I had come over to the USA to do a meditation teacher training with this great guy called Jon Kabat-Zinn. He was a scientist at MIT, and he developed this incredible science-based meditation de-stress program out of UMass Medical School, and I came over to train in that. And I we're up in upstate New York, and I went and got a cup of tea, and I walked out, and this couple was sitting out there. I said, "Can I sit down with you?" And it just so happened it was one of them is now my wife, and the other was her ex-partner at the time, who's also a friend of mine, and they were both based in Chattanooga. And,
Okay.
it wasn't like all the sparks flew, but it was just over time we became friends. But, I was in London, she was here, and we just talk. And then, that thing, I don't know whether you know this feeling, I'm pretty sure you do, where suddenly I thought, actually I really like this person, like I wasn't looking for love, at the time, but I thought, she's really great, so I said it to her, I just sort of plucked it up and said, look, I remember saying it to her, I really like you. And she said, yeah, I really like you too. And I said, no, I mean, I really like you, and she went, oh, okay, yeah, and she was up for it. And so we talk about, well, how could that happen? And I said, I don't know, but let's just.
So you're in London, she's in Chattanooga.
And I said, look, I'll come out. I said, I was thinking, I really wanted to leave London. I was kind of done with London by that point. I was big city. Had been there a long time. Beautiful city. I had a great situation there, but and I said, look, I'll come out and see where you are, and then we can maybe talk about how things might happen. And it just so happened that I came out, Signal Mountain. I loved it. I thought, yeah, this is great. Okay, well, let's just see what life has to offer. About a year or so later, I was just coming out a few times a year, and we were just holidaying in Europe occasionally, and it was quite pleasant. And then this old buddy of mine who I'd been working with in a coach training program phoned me up, and he'd moved to North America. He was living in Canada, and he said, I've met this guy. He's this really big influencer, big health influencer, and he wants me to set up a coach training program for you. Would you be interested? And I went, yeah, okay, that sounds pretty good. And then as it turned out, they wanted me to move out here. So that was, I started just contracting for them, and then eventually the job was to move out. And it just so, that was an incredible
opportunity.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Right? And so that was, we got married, and then bought a house up on Signal Mountain, and here we are.
Yeah. That's what I usually say. Behind every man's move, there is a woman.
or why people stay somewhere.
Or stay somewhere, too. Because
I
have the same story, because I moved to Chattanooga because of my wife.
I remember us talking.
I usually say that behind every man's move, there is a woman, or like you said, just stay. And also, so you work with couples too as a coach, correct?
Yeah, I had done a lot of work, particularly when I was in that previous marriage. It was not an easy marriage, and so we did a lot of work, a lot of couples work together, and so I did all sorts of training in things like nonviolent communication as well, all these different, and so I had all of that skill set. And then when I was out here, I realized that would be another niche that I'd like to work with, because it's hard, isn't it? When you're like, relationships are hard.
Yeah.
Where there are just times when what we most need is just some really good skills, some really good tools, and so the training I went and did was with the Gottman Institute, and John and Julie Gottman. John Gottman's one of the foremost researchers into couples. They have this program that is, your listeners may have actually heard about him. Gottman is famous for being able to predict whether a relationship will last or not within the first 3 minutes of hearing couples communicate. So I trained in their methods. Yeah.
So in your practice, or I mean, when you're coaching the couples, what is the one common, I won't say issue, but one common struggle that couples usually deal with?
Well,
communication.
It's communication.
Okay.
Communicate. I mean, of course, there are many other things, and not everyone's going to identify with that. But it's communication and communication styles. That I think it's the core of all of us, not just marriages and primary couple relationships.
Yeah, I mean, of course, it's not
Yeah.
Like I usually say, people say, oh, it's a 50-50. I don't say, no, it's not 50-50. It's 100-100. Why would you want to do 50-50? Because one person has to do 100%, the other person has to do 100%. And the communication, like you said. But I mean, I think also there is some relationship that previously they had a really bad experiences.
It's very true.
They also bring that into their current relationship.
Yeah, probably. I would say if we're going back into history, you probably even going further back. So it's all based in the work of attachment, like attachment theory and attachment styles, which is actually coming from our parents. It's what happens in the home, that because that is our first model. That's our primary model of relationships. And so the impact that happens from that is forming itself. It helps to form the way that we build bonds and attachments as we go forward in our lives. Are we secure? Are we insecure? All of these models are not something that we consciously do. They're just formed in us through.
So how we basically train ourselves not to indulge in this kind of, I mean, I know it's a behavioral kind of thing. And like you said, from parents, you learn that. But with someone like, having issues like that, how they basically, train themselves not to, go back that kind of a.
Well, I think you're on the money where you say train.
Yeah.
That's actually, I mean, first of all, we need awareness of these things. We need to be able to be willing to kind of go. And I like one of the things that I know, it's predominantly a behavior that men fall into is we can become defensive. That defensiveness can manifest as superiority or whatever it might be, and it's just a common trait. Like the Gottman research has shown, it's not only men, but it's something that it tends to. Women will probably come towards. To try and get things, and men will probably see, defend themselves and, sort of, give me some room or something like that. It just, it's not the old Mars and Venus thing, but these just are the ways we've been culturally conditioned most commonly. So finding awareness in those things and being able to find ways to recorrect them. And that's a slow training. It's what you pointed to as a training, but it has to start with being able to go, yeah, you're right. I did do that there.
Yeah. The first thing is the admission.
Yeah. You have to be, and got to be a big guy, right?
Yeah. Big guy, big girl. Yeah.
Suck it up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's because the most relationship is having a problem or, rocky things because they bring their previous relationship into their current relationship.
Absolutely.
And that's where the problems start. Yep. And also, absolutely. I also notice in some couples that they try to change each other. Even though when they were dating, everything seems so hunky-dory.
Absolutely.
And then when they get married, okay, I want to change this person because I don't like the way he or she talks, or I don't like the way how she or he basically fill up the dishwasher or whatever, like minor things. I don't know if you're familiar with the book called The 5 Love Languages.
Yes, I am. Yeah.
I think every couple needs to read that book because
it would certainly not hurt.
Gary Chapman, I think he basically found the niche or whatever you call to basically make things a little better, understandable. Mm-hmm. So what's the other? I want to say other, but like, common issue that, and do you know anything like specific in the couples that you pinpoint? I say, hey, this is where you needs to work on. There's certain things that you in your practice you find out.
Yeah, certainly with Gottman model, we do a lot of assessment to start with. We want to see how people are communicating. What are their communication styles? And also, there are some assessments. I mean, we're not doing large scale, full psychological assessments of people, and also I'm a coach, really, not a therapist. So I don't put myself forward as a mental health professional, but there can be, historic traumas, PTSD, there can be, there could have been sexual abuse, there can be all these kind of contributing factors manifest within primary relationships, and and so those things we're trying to figure out clinically. Significant levels of depression, for example, those kind of things. And some of those things have got nothing to do with the relationship. They're about external factors. They could be biochemical factors. So learning from my side, not being trained, and I don't want to train to work with those areas. But what I do know how to do is to refer people out to appropriate professionals. And that's one thing that may happen. Active addictions.
Yeah.
If people are in active addiction. Now, I have a lot of experience with addiction, but I'm not treating addiction. There are bottom lines that I would say if these things are impinging upon the ability for us to do meaningful work in couples work, I will point at it, but I will put a stop on things unless they're being addressed. We can't move forward unless they're being addressed. So there are a lot of things, there could be eating disorders playing out. There could be all sorts of things that are all going to sort of play into this picture of whether the relationship can be healthy. And I think that what I love about Gottman work as well is that, they're not saying we need to be perfect. They're finding a way for things not to suffer. For us not to suffer in the relationship, to find ways that we can be friends in there.
No, that's the key word you just said, suffering, because a lot of people just suffer.
Oh, man.
And because it's familiar things, because, that's why they don't want to
absolutely
change. The only thing I usually say the constant is the change, because it's you use the word underworld I saw in your bio.
Oh, yeah.
What does that mean? Well, what do you mean by underworld? What are...
Yeah, I'm not talking about the mafia.
Yeah, the mafia. Yeah, that's what I was just going to clear things up.
Just as a little aside, one of the things I did when I was going through that previous career is I went over. A buddy of mine got invited to DJ in Russia just after Perestroika. Wow. Yeah, it was really amazing. And they said, we're going to get you to play in this nightclub before you come and do the main gig. We were playing in this big, I don't know, some kind of dome and we showed up, and I kind of thought, this is kind of a bit odd, this club. I was looking around, and it was all like 50-odd-year-old guys like that, as thick as tree trunks, and sort of 19-year-old girls, And we realised it was a mafia club.
Oh.
It was Russian mafia. There we go. There's the underworld there. That's my underworld story.
Okay.
But the underworld I'm referring to in that is really out of the mythic traditions. And it's something I'm deeply interested in. It's about what do stories, and particularly old stories, mean to us in terms of what do they tell us about how our minds and our lives function? Because they do, myths and ancient stories are all talking about the archetypal ways we humans think and act and feel and love and die.
Interesting.
And they can enrich us when they do. And something that we see in a lot of the ancient tales, many from your continent, actually, your part of the continent, is that they all have this business of the underworld. There's an overworld and an underworld. And I'm not necessarily talking about the classic view of hell, but it's going into the darker aspects of ourselves that we all have.
Oh, yeah. Everybody has a darker side.
Right? The shadow, the Jungians would talk about. And if we deny that, then we're denying the wholeness of ourselves. And so that's why I have no shame about, having plumbed the deeper aspects of myself. In fact, I'm not afraid, as the Christians would say, to walk through the shadow of the valley of death.
Yeah. So how do you deal with your darker side? Because not everybody is trained or, capable of dealing with their darker side because.
Well, therapy, is a great way to do it. All sorts of personal discovery work. I've also engaged in what you might call wilderness rites of passage work, or I spent 4 days out in the wild in bear country. I was facilitated, but you go out with just a bit of water and a tarpaulin and a couple of matches, and you spend 4 days out on your own.
Wow.
And these are
like a retreat.
It's like a vision quest or something like that. These are in all sorts of cultural traditions, Celtic traditions, North American native traditions, Viking traditions. They all have some version of these things. And you go and meet yourself. You get to find out the darker parts when you spend that time with yourself.
So basically, going in the nature and talking to yourself and, trying to find the answers of your questions.
Yeah.
So you said you basically practice Buddhism, okay, for a long time.
Well, I've been meditating for about 45 years, but actually in this tradition of Buddhism, about 20 years.
20 years. So what are the lessons or a lesson you learn being practicing Buddhism that you cannot find any other religion?
Well,
spirituality.
What draws me, because I was raised as a Christian, I was an altar boy, I did, but what really draws me is that, first of all, I'm not expected to believe in anything. I don't have to have a belief in a guiding force, and that works for me.
You mean the higher power?
Yeah, that's right. That's there's certainly things more powerful than me.
Yeah.
Many, and that I'm quite comfortable with. But I think the things that really draw me and hold me into Buddhism we have this thing called the Four Noble. They call it the Four Noble Truths. It's one of the sort of core teachings and its teaching is that there is this thing called unsatisfactoriness in the world. We could call it suffering, but it's a much richer term than that. But what's really great about these Four Noble Truths is that it doesn't finish there and just go, there are things that suck it up, like that would be really bad, and it's your fault for that matter, which we could take on, it's all about you. No, it's not about you. It's just how the world is. This is how, if you make it about you, you're going to suffer more.
Yeah.
Right. But more importantly, as you go through the four of them, the final one is, and here's the way you don't suffer so much. And it's so beautiful. And actually they call them the Noble Truths, but the teachers I like call them the Noble Tasks. And that shifts it. It's not something you just have to go, yeah, that's true. It's something you go, that's something for me to do. And that's different. And the final one, how you get out of it, if I was to summarize, would be, first of all, live an ethical life. Be a good person. Do the right thing. Watch your heart. Second is, is cultivate the qualities of a good person. Be kind, be curious, be wise. Elevate your mental capacities, not just through regular forms of learning, but learning about life, learning about what really matters.
I think right now, the world we are living in, we are missing a lot of kindness because everybody has some kind of a attitude. This is, I don't know who said that, but this is the only disability in life is bad attitude because there's also a very famous quote from a very Islamic scholar. His name was Ali ibn Talib. He said, 2 things will define your character: when your patience when you have nothing, and your attitude when you have everything.
That's great.
Yeah. So I think that's basically, it all boils down to your kindness and your attitude, how you deal with people.
Right.
So before we wrap this, Rod, I'd actually like to know, so Rod, next 5 years, where you see yourself?
Well, I'm professionally.
Professionally,
I can see. My program is really getting up on its legs. This model of human development coaching that we have a school for that. So that's really launched pretty well. I think I'm probably going to not work quite as hard as I do. I've done a lot of.
You've done a lot of hard work.
I've done a lot. Well, particularly getting my programs up and all the accreditations and all that kind of stuff. I'm really enjoying the business of exploring philosophy and writing about philosophy. I'm now working on another paper with a co-author who I really like, and so I think in some ways being a sort of industry commentator, someone who's helping to shape. Because my industry of coaching, I think, really needs.
Yeah, we as shaping. Entrepreneurs and all that, we need some good coaches like yourself.
Yeah.
So that's your professional. How about your personal life?
Personal life, that's a real question for my wife and I at the moment, because she's from Europe originally as well, and
what part of Europe?
From Slovakia.
Slovakia, okay.
Yeah. So the old Czechoslovak Republic, the Slovak Republic, and we're finding it's interesting times we live in, where we're living, and we love our environment. We have wonderful friends here, and yet there are times when we're feeling less comfortable as immigrants.
Yeah.
And that's just weighing on us, and so we are contemplating, that our future might be back in Europe, so that's possible for us at the moment.
Moving back to Europe,
it's possible. Yeah.
So before we go, what would the message you would share with our audience?
Be kind.
Be kind.
Be kind to everyone. I think one of the things, and I know you'll get this, is that one of the great things about traveling and living in other cultures is it changes the way you see the world.
Yep.
You just can't see people as that different anymore. It helps you understand other minds. And that's been the greatest gift I've had, has just been to travel and understand people a little better, and to feel kinder.
No, I think exactly you just said, because I think we talked about this earlier too, that immigrants and also the people who travel around the world, that opens their mind to, basically learn about their different cultures and different people. There's a famous quote from Deepak Chopra that he said, your mind is like a parachute. It won't work unless it's open. So,
there it is, But also, even speaking other languages, isn't it?
Yeah,
because I know you speak at least a couple of languages.
Yes.
And you suddenly go, oh, that's why they think that way.
Yeah, traveling, of course, opens your mind like nobody's like anything. Yeah. And also that's how most of people, when I have some issues with people here, that, they talk about people who live across the world, but they've never been out of their own state or even own city. Yeah. And they have basically, comments about those people. Yeah. I said, dude, you can't even move from your city to another city. You're talking about the person who lives across the world. So, traveling, like I said, understanding, and being kind. Rod, thank you so much for coming. I mean, we can talk, an hour more now, but I appreciate your time and you coming down. But once your book is released, we want you to come back, and
Thank
we'll
you very
talk
much.
about that too.
Thank you, Farhan.
So before we leave, where people can find you, your work, and how they connect with you.
So for my personal coaching business, it's really easy. My name is Rod Francis, and my site is rodfrancis.com.
Okay.
Rodfranciscoaching.com, sorry.
Okay.
Rodfranciscoaching.com. That's my personal. My coach training, my couples work is done through a site called Relational Reconnector.
Okay.
So that's the Relational Reconnector.
And your social media?
My social media is, you could find me on Rod Francis Coaching.
Rod Francis Coaching on Instagram and Facebook?
That's only on Facebook. On Instagram it's through, I have a company called Interactualizer, and that's where the coach training company works through that. So the Instagram, the Facebook for the company, and LinkedIn. All
LinkedIn, you're on LinkedIn too.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, once again, thank you so much for
Farhan.
coming. And if you like this episode, please like, share, and subscribe. Until then, we'll see you next episode. Till then, keep seeking.